Hey there, it's Blair here at Time Trades. I hope everyone's having a great weekend. Today is Sunday, July 23rd, and this is your weekly video. Well, we're going to start, as usual, with a review of last week's forecast. It was very good. I'm going to give myself an A for this because we tagged the middle of the target box here and then rejected later in the week. So that was a very successful forecast. Where we left things off last week is we were talking about a downward sloping GAN fan as a trigger point for losing the trend. So I'm going to restore that here, and that's part of our Mars cycle fans. And this downward sloping GAN fan starts way up here at emanating from this point here, aligned with a Mars cycle. And you can see it's this orange line here coming down. And I suggested that would be a good line that in order to continue the bullish trend, that would need to hold. Well, that broke on Thursday, and we got a decisive close below it. Of course, that continued on Friday as well. So our trigger for a trend change has been activated here right after two closes right in our target box. So what does that mean for us going forward? Okay, so let's build up a new analysis. But before I do that, I want to show some enhanced features within time trades involving planetary lines. So I've been investing some time and effort here in time trades to improve the experience in working with planetary lines. And especially for lower priced stocks and Forex and crypto, anything under $1 or around $1 had a not great experience in working with the Wheel of 24 planetary lines. That has been fixed. So I want to show that to you here. All this, of course, is available to you to try and use at timetrades.com. So we can turn on the planetary lines by going to the Wheel of 24 settings here on the right and turn on Show 24 Lines. All of this is described in Jean Long's great book called The Universal Clock. So I'm not going to go into detail about what exactly a Wheel of 24 is or the 24 lines, but the super quick summary is we basically divide the 360 degrees of a circle into 24 spokes where there's 15 spokes of 24 values each, 15 times 24 being 360. So a complete circle, a complete wrap or lap around the circle will traverse 24 degrees. Okay, so every 24 degrees, we can convert that to price and display a purple line on the screen here. That's what the Show 24 line is. And we can also use this method to convert the location of different planets here. So we can turn on Venus, for example, and display that. And when you do, you get actually what is quite compelling trend lines, natural trend lines that channel price. And this is on EURUSD. You can see how it's respecting these Venus trend lines quite well. We can also play around with it and try the sun. The sun also works quite well. I'd encourage you to try this out. It also works great on crypto as well. I was playing around with XRP the other day. So we can do the same thing with XRP. We can turn on 24 lines. We can turn on the sun. You can see how you get these wicks above the sun line here. And of course, back on July 13th, we got a huge wick up above the sun line. And it looks like we're starting to close back below both the sun line and a Wheel of 24 line on XRP. So that's an enhanced feature in time trades that's now working much, much better for these lower price coins and Forex. Okay, so as we build a new forecast going forward, I want to spend a little time doing a bit of a research, sharing with you my research on Venus retrograde, okay? Because Venus has just gone retrograde. And of course, there's a lot of talk about this in the financial astrology community on social media. As usual, I wanted to go back and do a deep dive on this and take a look at all the recent Venus retrogrades going all the way back to 1975. So we're looking at SPX here, so we can start by looking at what happened in 1975. So right now we're only focusing on Venus retrogrades in Leo. Okay, so those are the only ones that I'm gonna share with you because that's what's happening right now. Okay. So in 1975, we started retrograde in Virgo and retrograded into Leo. Retrograde, if you're not familiar, is where a planet appears to be moving in the reverse direction in the sky. Of course, it isn't. It's just all to do with relative motion between Earth and Venus. So basically what it means is Venus is actually quite close to Earth, and it's about to lap Earth on the inside track, of course. So for a short period of time, it appears as though it's going retrograde or backwards in the sky. Okay, so here's Venus retrograding in Virgo, and it's shifting into Leo. Now, one of the things I marked on this chart here is the midpoint of this retrograde cycle. Now, a couple things I want to point out here. Where price was at the start of the retrograde, where price was at the end of the retrograde, and this is like the maximum extent of volatility. Maximum volatility here was about -7.5%. But also look at what happens around the midpoint. That's the blue line here. We had a pivot about a day afterwards, about a day after this blue line. So, okay, that's interesting. Let's go take a look at 1983. So we can go to that rectangle. Here's 1983. We had a pivot one day after the blue line. Price was actually pretty close to the beginning and end, but there was certainly some volatility in the middle. But the beginning and the end price were very close to each other. But interestingly, we got a pivot right on the day of the midpoint of the cycle in 83. Let's go to 1991. 1991. Again, we had closing price very close to opening price, and we had a pivot 1, 2, 3 days, well, 4 days before the midpoint. Okay, so that is 1991. Let's take a look at 99. We can go to that rectangle and zoom in. Pivot 2 days after the midpoint. And again, price very close beginning and end. Okay. Now we can go to 2007. Now, 2007 had a big flush down, about -8% here, and a pivot within 2 days of the midpoint. But again, it netted out to be not very much, with closing price being very close to opening price. And then 2015. Okay, so 2015 had a pretty significant flush down. The day of the midpoint was actually a major pivot here. And then after that, there was a huge flush down. The closing price of the retrograde cycle was significantly lower than the opening price here. Okay, so a couple patterns emerge from looking at all these, right? One is that there's a significant pivot around the midpoint, plus or minus a couple days. I think there was one outlier around 4 days. And secondly, with most of the time, I would say I think there was 1 or 2 exceptions, including 2015. Most of the time, opening price is close to closing price within that retrograde cycle. I think 1975 was lower, and same with 2015. Yeah, 1975 closed near pretty much at the low. Okay. And 2015 was lower as well. Pretty much everything else was reasonably close opening to closing price. Okay, so what does that mean for us going forward as we build our new forecast? So let's go and do that on the right page. Here we go. Okay, so right now on our forecast, we are going to identify the midpoint of Venus retrograde, which is right there. And we've got this forecast box we created last week down here. It actually, the NQ futures actually got super close to the top here of this. We're only about 100 and some odd points away from the top of that forecast box. So this is the opening price here of Venus retrograde. So we're only looking at the midpoint here of Venus retro. If we want to take a look at when is the end of Venus retro, we can go to this rectangle. So here we are. We've got the midpoint on August 14th, and we've got the end of it on September 1st. Okay. So if we head back to our forecast tab, so we've got the midpoint here on the 14th. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to adjust this based on the research we just did. I'm going to shift this down a little bit so that, you know, we capture this this GAN-FAN here, this 1x1 GAN-FAN, which is always super important. And we've got 2 days on the left side of the pivot and 2 days on the right side of the pivot. So this is implying this is going to be a pivot low, and I'll show you why in a second when we go to time trades. Okay, but basically, I'm looking for some volatility here as we move down and tag this next target box on August 14th, that being the midpoint of Venus retrograde, and then I think we're going to come back up into early September here. And so that's basically the profile I'm looking for. We could come back up to match that price. We could come back up to exceed that price in late August, early September. Okay. So let's take a look at why I think this is going to be a low pivot and not a high pivot. A lot of it has to do with the mass pressure index. So let me just rearrange this a little bit. We'll turn this off. And what we're going to take a look at here is the mass pressure index in the Qs. We're also going to turn on non-directional probabilities. We can zoom in here. And the mass pressure index is a forecast that does not use machine learning. It's based on orbital cycles of Venus. And it's dropping down into, oh, look at this. We've got a cluster of pivots, August 16th, 17th, 18th, which is very close to our August 14th midpoint date. Okay, so what we're seeing here, and actually we're seeing a low in the mass pressure index right around August 14th as well. Okay, so that's why I think we're going to see a pivot low here around mid-August. I do think that given the strength of the recent bullish trend, there's going to be a relatively good amount of buying support here. I don't think we're going to see huge correction, but it'll be a moderate correction in both price and time. It'll drag out for 2 or 3 weeks and until mid-August, and then I believe we will be moving up. So that's the updated forecast there. Of course, all of that is subject to price action, and it's a forecast. It's not a it's not there's no guarantees, of course, as you know. So all of this is subject to good risk management practices, and as always, price action takes priority. Okay, so we can also see the same thing here in SPX, right? If we go to SPX and turn on the mass pressure index, we see a drop bottoming around August 11th, August 14th. We also see pivot highs in the machine learning peaking at, or sorry, pivots, not in this is non-directional, so we don't know if it's a pivot high or a pivot low, but we do see a pivot here peaking August 16th. So that is the reason for me interpreting this pivot as a pivot low and not a pivot high. Okay, so we're just going to add another arrow here. Now, this is a fairly long arrow extending for about 3 weeks now. Of course, nothing moves in a straight line, so keep in mind there's going to be some volatility here over the next few weeks. It's going to be much more less straight than it appears. But I think for these purposes, it's good enough. Like the overall direction is going to be is going to trend down / sideways for the next 3 weeks, in my opinion. So that's the new forecast going forward. Okay. Now, next up, I want to take a look at Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is not generating a super helpful machine learning forecast when it comes to moves. That can happen sometimes, but it is generating a super helpful forecast when it comes to the mass pressure index. And again, this is based on Venus orbital cycles. And we can see that this is calling for a shift down, maybe a pop up initially into July, around getting up into the high 30K range with some spikes up there. But we're looking for a low around early August, August 4th, August 5th, in the 27K range. So if we turn on magic levels, we get some nice confluence here with our magic levels. There's a magic level at 27,560 that should provide some good support. And then this would provide a pretty strong platform on which Bitcoin can resume a move up here into late August and September. So that's the forecast here for Bitcoin. Let's go and take a quick look at gold. Okay, so when it comes to gold, what really stands out is this major cluster of pivots in late August, okay? And we've got a big move down into that. Now, I don't know if this is a pivot high or a pivot low, but what we do see that is bullish is this strong support here from the orange magic level at 176.4. That's on the GLD ETF, okay? And we have a high probability of a move. Again, we don't know the direction here, on July 28th. Okay. But what we have seen in the dollar is that the dollar index, the DXY, has been rebounding after a big drop down here. So that is providing some bearish headwinds for gold and other commodities. So we have a pivot here, July peaking in DXY, July 28th. So it looks like this is likely to be a pivot high given the recent trend. And it looks like that could end around July 28th. So if the dollar keeps going up until July 28th, then it's fair to assume that GLD will see a move down into July 28th. And this kind of lines up with some of the probabilities that we're seeing here. We're seeing a probability of a big move July 28th and pivot August 1st. So I think in the short term, we can see a little bit of a correction here in GLD. But that correction could come to an end around early August there. It's very important for GLD to hold this magic level at 176.35 to keep the bull case intact. All right. So with that, let's take a look at the Nifty as we close the call. So the Nifty, we like to use GAN fans. So GAN fans are active here. And we can see again that last week, the Nifty had a nice move up above this upper Ganfang channel here. Nice move up, which activated the next Ganfang channel above. And we don't see any probabilities of moves here. So we can take a look at the daily mass pressure index to see what that's forecasting. And of course, Venus retrograde also affects Nifty. I haven't done a deep dive research on that. But it looks like we might be looking at more of a correction in time here with some sideways action until mid-August, similar to what we see in North American stocks. So probably a good time to just be patient here and not overtrade on the Nifty. Might be a good time to switch strategies into maybe more option writing instead of outright directional bets on the Nifty. Okay, so that's it for me. Good luck trading this week. As always, trade safe, manage risk, and we'll talk to you again next week. Bye now.